I'm proposing that everybody create their own program to take care of themselves, not to be a biohacker, but because it will give you a better output in whatever you're building for performance. Your brain is biological hardware. It runs on three inputs: sleep, movement, and fuel.
A sizable and significant 711 genes were distorted in their activity, caused by a lack of sleep.
We need to treat ourselves like athletes. You train it, you protect it, and time it. You will be shocked at how much your mind will clear up. So an athlete can only peak 2 to 3 times a year. So think about that. The LeBron Jameses, the best Olympic athletes you've ever seen. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is DeWeese, and today we are diving into clarity. And the more I dive into systems, and specifically all my projects right now, all of my side projects are on my own AI system, partially local and partially not. And the more I dive into all of this, the more I realize that clarity of thought is extremely important. And the nice thing about AI systems is that you get to the end result faster. And in getting to the end result faster, you find out constraints faster. You find out what your limitations are, what your system's limitations are, etc. faster. Today, the presentation is clarity is not a fixed trait. It's a trained, managed resource, like an athlete conditioning. And as I'm sure a lot of you can see, I am a fitness nerd, geek, enthusiast. And I have spent a lot of time researching sports science, nutrition, and I have coached athletes through diet, nutrition, and different programs and the like. And I've worked with Gen Pop as well as athletes and professional athletes. And as I am working in my AI systems, synapses fire in my brain and I draw connections to other things that I have learned about. Your brain is biological hardware. It runs on three inputs: sleep, movement, and fuel. And just like any engine, it takes maintenance and care. And I think that a lot of people in this space just think about their intellect. How do they build their skills around computer systems and intellect? And I would just like to pause and say that your brain runs on more, and it requires sleep, movement, and fuel. So I'd just like to remind everybody that we need sleep, movement, and fuel to perform our best. And I will dive into some of the correlations that I'm seeing between optimizing for a sports and optimizing for building systems. And I think a lot of people look at people like me or maybe label me a jock, and therefore, because I'm a jock, I must be stupid or I don't know anything. And let me just tell you that some of the smartest people I have ever met are sports science people, people that have studied sports science and science related to the human body, nutrition, and exercise, and most specifically, strength training and pushing through lack of sleep. So if you continue to keep getting less sleep, less sleep, less sleep, you may get away with it for a while. Most of the time, the athletes that we see get away with this are young. They're teenagers in their early 20s. And at some point, it drives this deficit, this sleep deficit. And Can you catch up on sleep? Yes. Some studies show that you can catch up on sleep. So, for example, let's say you get 6 hours and you needed 8, and the next day you get 10. Okay. You caught up on your sleep. But the more this compounds, if you just get 6 hours, and I'm not saying everybody needs 6 hours, some people only need 4, some people need 8, which is why these Whoop devices have gained so much popularity, not just with athletes, but Gen Pop alike. And it is because everyone is so individualized. There are some people that truly only need 4 hours of sleep. I'm someone that if I'm training really hard, I need closer to like 9.5 hours of sleep, which is why right now in this season of my life, I am not training hard. I'm maintaining a certain level of cardio, and that's really it. Okay. Because I know I'm in a certain season of my life where I need to dedicate time elsewhere. And I'm just proposing that everybody create their own program to take care of themselves and not just to be woo woo, not to be soft, not to be a biohacker, but because it will give you a better output in whatever you're building for performance. I propose everybody think of themselves like a professional athlete and treat yourself as such. And I believe you will be shocked at how much your mind will clear up. So, we all know that lack of sleep leads to attention and working memory begins to fail. Okay. It can add to rigid thinking. The brain becomes less flexible. We know that when we're tired, we can't absorb new information. And this is all studied. You will go, yeah, I knew that. I knew that. Are the top athletes going out and drinking the night before they perform and then performing well the next day? Yeah. Are there the athletes that can get away with it? Yes. Yes, there are athletes that can get away with it. Do they get away with it their entire career? Usually not. And I think when we watch athletes that do quote unquote party or not take care of themselves, I think we can see that their career gets cut short. They get an injury, they go to jail, they get in trouble. It creates more problems than it's worth. And I'm not saying don't go out and have fun. That's not at all what I'm saying. And you will see in this presentation, I go through multiple things to look at. When we're looking at health, I think that because the way Western medicine is designed, we tend to think of the body in silos. And I don't think of the body in that way. I think of it as a holistic unit. Yes, can you break it up into its individual systems and individual parts? And is that useful? It can be useful. Yes, absolutely. And do we need specialists in those things? Yes, we do. But when it comes to performance, I think the best framing is usually coming from a more holistic framing and helping the body work together to produce the best performance possible for that individual, regardless of whether you're training for a sports event or you're trying to build a better business or a better system or work with AI or challenge yourself in any kind of mental capacity or pursuit, any kind of achievement. So, we all know that lack of sleep leads to attention and working memory begins to fail. Okay. It can add to rigid thinking. The brain becomes less flexible. We know that when we're tired, we can't absorb new information. And this is all studied back. Well, these are all based off of studies. Okay. And I do have links in here. If anybody wants a copy of my presentation, I'm happy to share all the references. But risk perception recalibrates. So we become more accustomed to risks faster when we're tired. So if we're driving fast and we're tired, we're less likely to recognize it as a risk that we're going too fast than if we are have slept well and are alert. Okay? And same goes with building a business, building a system, especially in AI, because things are moving so fast. If you put it on cruise control and just start approving everything in your system, you won't recognize the risk as quickly as you need to and could go off course. quite quickly and quite easily. So sleep loss cuts the wire between the rational brain and the emotional one. 5 nights of partial restriction reduces data gathering before decisions and raised risk taking. So 1 night of total sleep deprivation did not produce the same effect. So again, it leads to this chronic buildup. So there's a certain way you will feel after being sleep deprived 1 night. But if you do it night after night after night, it becomes a boiling frog syndrome. You may have brain fog and not even realize it. Okay. And I've noticed this also with food. When I coached people, if people were eating a diet that had very few nutrients in it, and then we move them over to a diet that has more nutrients and getting them a good multivitamin, after about 30 days, they go, oh my gosh, I'm thinking better. I didn't even realize I had brain fog. A lot of these symptoms are not recognizable until you pull yourself out of it. And I recommend people try to pull yourself out of it and be consistent for 30 days. 30 days, in my experience, is the sweet spot. So, Matthew Walker's Sleep and the Brain, a vivid clip from a sleep scientist lands harder than a slide. So, I asked my agent to give us clips to watch together.
I would like to start with testicles. Men who sleep 5 hours a night have significantly smaller testicles than those who sleep 7 hours or more. In addition, men who routinely sleep just 4 to 5 hours a night will have a level of testosterone which is that of someone 10 years their senior. So a lack of sleep will age a man by a decade in terms of that critical aspect of wellness. And we see equivalent impairments in female reproductive health caused by a lack of sleep. Need sleep after learning to hit the save button on those new memories so that you don't forget.
If you are in a phase where you're learning and you're really trying to have your brain absorb as much learning as possible, you have to sleep. You will get to a point where you feel like your head will explode, and that's the time to walk away. Okay, go out on a walk. Go do something else. Play with your kids, play with your dog, call a friend. I will give you a list of recommendations later on in this performance program that I'm proposing everyone take on, whether you're an athlete or you're driving to build a business or you just want to learn at a faster pace. When you feel like your head will explode, it's time to stop and take a nap, sleep. And you will notice that if you stick to this ritual, if you learn and get adequate sleep, you will look back in 30 days and you won't recognize yourself from day one. If you compare yourself from day one to day 30 and continue to learn as much as you can day in and day out.
You also need sleep before learning to actually prepare your brain, almost like a dry sponge, ready to initially soak up new information.
So our brain is the center of our nervous system. And if our nervous system is overly stressed, underslept, your brain needs that shutdown period to wash, refresh, reset the nervous system. So not only do you need sleep before you learn so that it's ready to absorb information like a sponge, you need it after to process the information that you absorbed that day.
And without sleep, the memory circuits of the brain become waterlogged and you can't absorb new memories. And let me just tell you about one area that we've moved this work out into clinically, which is the context of aging and dementia. Because it's, of course, no secret that as we get older, our learning and memory abilities begin to fade and decline. But as a deeper dive, I want to focus on this: sleep loss and your immune system. And here I'll introduce these delightful blue bolts, and they limited them to 6 hours of sleep a night for 1 week. And then they measured the change in their gene activity profile relative to when those same individuals were getting a full 8 hours of sleep a night. And there were two critical findings. First, a sizable and significant 711 genes were distorted in their activity, caused by a lack of sleep. The second result was that about half of those genes were actually increased in their activity, the other half were decreased. Now, those genes that were switched off by a lack of sleep were genes associated with your immune system. The first is regularity. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. No matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend, regularity is king, and it will anchor your sleep and improve the quantity and the quality of that sleep.
And movement. So exercise doesn't just change the body, it physically grows the brain. So one thing that I like to think about is neurons. And neurons are so interesting because neurons are nerve cells. They're primarily, most people think of them in the brain. And when people think of performance and function and they think of sleep and nerves, they think of the brain. We have to remember that nerves are all over our body and they're carrying information this way and that way. And not all nerve function stops at the brain. And I believe we can grow our brains through movement. Okay. You hear Reiki specialists talk about how we store memories all over our body. And any kind of study with neurons is just immensely fascinating. I'm not here to be a full expert on neurons, but what I am here to do is try to shake up the way that you think about your brain, your nervous system, your neurons, and movement. If you stop using it, you lose it. So if you're sitting at your desk and typing away or using your dominant hand for everything and doing the same thing day in and day out and never challenging your movement pattern, you will have atrophy. You will have nervous system atrophy. You will have muscular atrophy, and you will show signs of aging sooner. When we're children and we're learning how to crawl, we're doing this cross movement where you have opposite hand, opposite foot, opposite arm, opposite leg, coordinating, working together. It's a coordination, a proprioception, where you understand where your body is in space. And we work really hard as toddlers to learn how to walk. And then we learn how to run. And kids learn how to move their bodies in all sorts of ways. And they're constantly practicing, constantly trying to do somersaults, rolling over, climbing things, swinging, climbing ropes, crawling, somersaulting, cartwheeling. When the playgrounds go away at school, we, for the most part, stop practicing moving. And from that moment forward, our nervous system goes into a state of atrophy because our bodies continuously have a rule where if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think a lot of people will be surprised if you even just try to do some simple movements on the floor. You will realize that it takes a lot more brain effort, even just to do the most simplest of things, like a bird dog or a dead bug, or some simple yoga moves if you haven't been practicing working off the floor in some time. So one way to activate the brain is to do some sort of new, novel movement pattern that you haven't done in a while. And of course, it comes down to what can you do within your limits? What can you do to challenge yourself without hurting yourself? And this is also something that athletes run up against all the time. Yeah, a movement may be great for performance, but what's the risk of that movement? Yes, Olympic lifting is amazing. So when I say to people, I've done or I'm practicing Olympic lifting when I was practicing Olympic lifting, and they thought I was in the Olympics or something. I'm like, no, I'm not like some great athlete or anything. I'm not going to the Olympics. I'm practicing the movements of Olympic lifting.
Hi, I'm CJ Cummings, two-time youth and four-time junior world champion in the sport of weightlifting. I'm currently a member of Team USA. Let's go hit the gym. Okay, so we're here in the gym, and what we're gonna work on today is the snatch. The snatch is one of the easiest, but one of the most technical lifts in the sport of Olympic weightlifting.
Easy, easy, easy. So we've got the snatch, the clean, and jerk. And there's a bunch of different ways to do some of these movements. Clean and jerk.
The clean and jerk is the second of the two lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk, contested in the sport of weightlifting.
Great movements because you're learning how to move weight from the floor to overhead. So you're doing maximum work with the weight. And it's a system. You know, you want to learn how to deadlift first, and you want to learn how to squat properly first. And then you break down each of the mechanics of the pull and the push mechanics of each lift, and you practice those over and over and over until it's seamless. Because if you don't get your face out of the way as you're pulling up, so when you're going from here to here to here, you better move your face out of the way, and you better have some good shoulder mobility to get your shoulders up and over here. I can't even do it anymore, right? I used to have great mobility in my shoulders. I would have to really work on my overhead shoulder mobility to get back into this, and I should. And I sit, and the reason why I don't have good shoulder mobility is because I sit at this damn computer way too much. So now when I go to the gym, I think about, yeah, could I go in there and do some cleans and these super complex movements? Yes, I could start practicing those again. But what's my risk for injury at 42? It's pretty high, right? If I want to progress. And that's one of the problems with weightlifting is as you progress, you either have to progress in reps, the number of reps you do with a weight, or you have to increase the weight. And you can vary it, you know, based off of your strength program, you know, how many reps you're doing and so on. But my point is that when we are looking for movements that will be of the most benefit to us, we have some considerations. We have to consider what we enjoy. We have to consider what our body needs. And we have to consider what we'll actually do. And the reason why I put what we like first is because if we hate it, we won't do it. If we hate it, we can will our way through it for a certain amount of time and either learn to love it or just continue to hate it. So I've landed on this rule where I have to do something at least 10 times before I decide I hate it or love it. Okay. For instance, when I was training for a bodybuilding competition, I had to do cardio. It was advised to do cardio a certain amount of time. So I would sit on the Stairmaster for 5 minutes, the bike for 5 minutes, run on a treadmill for 5 minutes. I would rotate because I was just so damn bored. I hated it so much. I hate just sitting on a conveyor belt in one place and going nowhere. And it's just so boring. I can't even, I know some people love it or people love running and good for you, but I just absolutely hated it. So I would have to trick myself. I would have to take classes that I liked, that I knew would get me the cardio I needed, that I would be consistent with. And so I decided to do dance class because that's the only way that I would get through an hour of cardio without wanting to shoot myself. I did practice weightlifting. I think strength training has so many benefits. And the reason why neuroscience comes up with strength training is because in strength training, it comes down to what your nervous system can handle because we all have governing systems within our body. And the reason why when you go and lift something up, your muscle doesn't rip right off of your bone is because of governing systems within your nervous system. Think about adrenaline dumps. Think about the mom who miraculously lifts the car off of her child and gets her child out of a car accident. There are enormous superhuman acts that have occurred that almost go unexplainable because people are far stronger than they realize. And so there's a mental barrier there for people. One is the mental barrier, them thinking they can't lift it or it's heavier than they can lift. So therefore they fail before they even start. And there's also another point where there's just a governing system there. And you have to train your body that when you hit that governing limit, you're not going to die. Okay. And you hit that limit as much as you can in one day, your governing system allows you to access more of that nervous system power that we have. And that's why I love weightlifting. And I got so obsessed with it because I just thought, wow, just learning how to work with your governing system of the body is just absolutely fascinating. So, exercise literally builds a new brain through a molecule called BDNF. It's a fertilizer for neurons. Brain derived neurotropic factor facilitates neuroplasticity and cognition. Its release is intensity dependent. Push harder, make more. Aerobic work also drives neurogenesis, new neurons in the hippocampus, linked to better memory. All right. So the key point here is that you have to do something that's relatively challenging. Okay. And challenging can have a couple of different buckets. Is it challenging your coordination? Is it challenging your balance? Is it challenging your range of motion or your mobility? Is it challenging your aerobic system? Is it challenging your muscular system? Aerobic is for memory, mood, neurogenesis, which just means the creation of new neurons, executive function, resistance, executive function, and visuospatial process. So basically, proprioception and its own growth pathway. The best programs do both and combine exercise with a mental task beats either alone. So vary the stimulus or the body stops adapting. The same is true of the mind. So there is a fine line here. Okay. So in strength training programming, you have to have consistency in the exercises that you're doing in order to figure out if you're getting stronger. You also have to practice those movement patterns over and over and over again to make them as safe as possible. Because God forbid you go for 1 rep max and your mechanics and your lift are off. Now you're just going to hurt yourself. Okay, so part of doing squats every day, there's squat everyday programs, there's deadlift everyday programs. There's a push-pull, people that split it up different times during the week. But the point is, you may be in a strength program over a about 6 to 8 week period where you're doing the same exercises every week. Yes, there may be difference on Monday versus Tuesday versus Wednesday versus Thursday versus Friday versus Saturday versus Sunday. Yes, I said every day of the week. You can go to the gym every week. It won't kill you. Every day of the week, it won't kill you. You just work on different things while you're there. So if you're squatting on Monday, deadlifting on Wednesday, and benching on Friday, that's a fine place to start. And practicing those and keeping those in a strength training program, especially for someone who is bodybuilding or powerlifting or doing any kind of strength program at all. But you will have to add ancillary movements. So when you are practicing your squat, you'll go, oh my gosh, like I'm just using my quads. You know, you're balancing on your toes. You can't get into your heels. You can't really get back into a proper squat. Perhaps your hips won't go below your knees, won't go below parallel. These are all symptoms as you're doing a movement that you're familiar with and your body knows how to do properly, or you're practicing on how to get it better or the mechanics of that movement better. You will start to diagnose different parts of the body that may be weaker or dominant. Okay. And that's what your ancillary exercises are for, to build out the supportive muscles to make your main lifts go up or get better, improve in your goals, right? So this whole stimulus, yeah, if you don't keep adapting the stimulus, the body stays the same. And adapting the stimulus means a couple of different things. You could just increasing the weights, going from 10 reps to 12 reps is changing the stimulus. It can be the same exercise. You're just changing the number, the weight that you're doing. If you are dancing, obviously the stimulus is changing all the time. If you're boxing, the stimulus is changing all the time. You're practicing different combinations, different moves, different defensive drills, and the like. So picking something that builds strength. So you want to have some sort of strength training protocol. And then you also want to have some sort of protocol that helps you maintain general athleticism, general functionality. The brain is 2% of your body and burns 20% of the energy. What you feed it shows up in how you think and how well you think. If you're eating foods full of chemicals and toxins, your nervous system will be processing those, and the processing will not perform very well. Drinking clean water, filtered water, getting enough minerals, enough salt, getting enough healthy fats, staying away from hyper processed fats, sticking to more natural fats like butters and olive oils and coconut oils, sticking with protein. I really don't even care what kind of protein you're getting as long as it's as clean as possible. And carbs, like, who cares? I know a lot of people care about carbs, but you don't really need them. Okay. So an essential nutrient is fats and proteins. Like, you don't need carbs. You can live without carbs. You'll be fine. And I'm not saying carbs are bad. I'm just saying snacking is not a necessity. Okay. Snacks are for 2-year-olds. They're not for adults, in my opinion. Okay. We don't need to be running around snacking all the time. It's not a good habit. One eating pattern keeps showing up, the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet has over and over and over again shown to be a really great diet for a lot of people. I'm not going to break down and get into a diet camp. I'm not going to fight over what diet's the best. Eat the food, don't just pop the pill. So whole foods diets show consistent benefits. Isolated supplements are inconsistent. The synergy of real food beats a capsule. So I think we need both. I'm totally for I think our food is more depleted now than it ever has been ever before in history. A plot of land has less nutrients in it than it did 100 years ago. So therefore, how can the plant have nutrients in it if the soil doesn't have nutrients? If the soil is depleted of nutrients, how can the plant have nutrients? It just makes it up naturally? No, it's just not there. Okay, so we have in a lot of cases, we have to take vitamins and supplements. Part 3, the science of peaking. So you've conditioned the substrate. Now the harder truth, you can't run at peak forever. So my point in asking everyone to consider developing your personal mental program. What program are you going to follow that incorporates getting more sleep, improving your diet, and adding some sort of movement? So, what is your program between movement, sleep, and food that will help you perform better? That is what I'm asking. Okay? Because athletes peak on purpose. If you're working on a project that is important to you, you should want to perform at your very best. And if you want to perform at your very best, you absolutely have to think about sleep. You absolutely have to think about diet, and you absolutely have to think about movement, because we can't run at redline forever. A lot of us may be running at redline. I am 100% on board with working in sprints and hauling ass and working as hard and as fast as possible. However, there will be a time where you have to take a break, or you have to have a season where you're not working as much. So we can either think of peaking through seasons. I think it's a great way of doing it. I think that humans naturally work well with seasons. You can also just think about it on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. Sundays are my days to not touch a computer and go to church and watch TV and hang out and do laundry. There's different ways to do it for everyone. And so I wanted to bring forward some ideas based off of sports performance to help you think about how to frame your own personal performance program. So an athlete can only peak 2 to 3 times a year. So think about that. The LeBron Jameses, the best Olympic athletes you've ever seen, these CrossFit athletes, basketball players, baseball players, hockey players, doesn't matter. They peak 2 to 3 times a year. Okay, let's say you have a fighter and they have an event. You want to peak that athlete for that specific event so that they perform their very best on that exact day. I think a lot of people, when they see an athlete, they just assume they move like that all the time and they can do that at any time. You just, oh, they're a natural athlete. They can just run out and catch that football, 8 feet in the air and get a touchdown at a moment's notice. Yeah, are there freak athletes out there? I'm not denying that there's freak athletes out there. But what I'm saying is even the best athletes in the world will only have their best days 2 to 3 times a year. So if you are an athlete and you want to have an event and you know that your particular sport, you do 6 events a year. Well, there's going to be some compromise. So there's a difference between what's ideal for the best, very best peak performance, and then there's reality. There's what the science says about peaking and performing your best, and then there's reality. Most athletes can't just perform 2 to 3 times a year. There's no way. Very few athletes they're only working 2 to 3 days a year. Okay. We have seasonal athletes. We have athletes that are in the fight game that fight once a month or once every other month. So my point in telling you this is that although we can aim for peak performance and understand what the science is for peak performance, we don't want to obsess on it too much because it's not real life. Most people don't live in a lab and can eat exactly whatever and sleep whenever the exact studies say to sleep and under all these exact conditions, okay? So don't focus on the perfectionism side of this, all right? And my point in showing this to you is that I don't care who you are, everybody struggles with this balance because the optimal is not real life. We're not living in optimal. We're just trying to understand what is optimal and do our very best to configure our lives around so that we can try to take care of ourselves so that we have better performance and produce better work. So the power lifter versus the jiu-jitsu athlete. The power lifter blocks build towards one movement, hypertrophy and strength, a taper, arriving at maximum force on meet day. So a powerlifter is peaking for peak strength on the day of the powerlifting meet. He's got 3 lifts, bench press, deadlift, and squat, 1 peak, and that's how they think about their peaking. And then a jiu-jitsu athlete, a lot of them have tournaments. So they're not just going and doing 1 lift or a couple of lifts. They're having to train for a tournament where they have to do work all day. If you win your first match and then you progress to the next. If you win that match, you progress to the next. And it can go and on and on and on and on and on. So these are different types of events. They require different types of skills and abilities and same level of planning. So one of my most favorite people to listen to is Lou Simmons. He developed the conjugate method, and I would like to share some of his wisdom with you because he was a great man.
All right, DeWeese Simmons. All right, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you guys asked for me to come out and have a lot of fun. So they've asked me to talk about the conjugate system. All right, DeWeese Simmons. All right, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you guys asked for me to come out and have a lot of fun. So they've asked me to talk about the conjugate system. So the conjugate system is basically a system of training where you constantly rotate exercises. It was basically had a name in 1972. The Dynamo Club in the Soviet Union had an exercise where they used 25 exercises to 40 for a group of highly disqualified weightlifters, 70 to be exact. Bodybuilders always gone to different gyms, but it at least had a name in 1972, the conjugate system. All right, and the conjugate system is very important because you constantly rotate exercises on the max effort day for us. If you handle weights at 90% above for 3 weeks in a row, you'll actually go backwards. So at Westside, every week we switch exercises. We max out every week 100% plus. And it's like the Bulgarian system, where the Bulgarians would do near maximum weights every day. All right? They use no percentage. The same with us. On that day, we really don't care if a new record, but if we don't, we don't. But each week we max out, so 52 weeks out of the year, we max out. That's probably why my gym's the strongest gym in the world.
Yeah, and he built some of the strongest athletes in the world.
63, I pulled 675 deadlift at 270.
All right, so he was an incredible person. He developed his own equipment. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think it's a good idea to study different industries and look at things from different perspectives to gain a more holistic understanding. And the guys live and breathe powerlifting. It's all they think about.
50 years old, I squatted 920. It was the third best squat in the world, open. When I was 50 years old, I benched 600. No one had ever benched 550. I pulled 722 as 212 pounds. I was 57 years old, pulled 715 at 217. And when I was 63, I pulled 675 deadlift at 217 and squatted 730 and benched 510. Westside is my life. This is all I do. This is where all my friends are and all my memories.
There's lots of, he's certainly a very interesting person. If you're interested in any kind of weight training programs, I'm not saying follow these hardcore weightlifting programs, but to me, it's interesting to see what the limits are in regards to the nervous system and muscle. The 7 pillars. So peaking is only possible on a maintained base. So you have to have a very good base before you start trying to peak an athlete. So building the base, having a base layer of strength, having a base layer of cardio, and so on. These 7 are the base building phase for the mind. What keeps a balanced mind, a calm nervous system, and a grounded body? 7 inputs that keep the instrument tuned. So physical, mental, emotional, social, relational, spiritual, somatic, like music and sound and vibration and grounding and drums, equals clarity. A balanced mind, a calm nervous system, and a grounded body make for better decisions. And I am proposing that we think about ways to build our own personal programs to focus on all of these areas to become excellent and train the mind, not do everything every day. That's burnout and that's a trap. A periodized plan, like an athlete, timed towards what matters. So what season are you in? What 4 phases could you do? What can you do on a daily basis? The non-negotiables in regards to movement. Maybe do some reading, some writing, one grounding exercise, or one nervous system practice. A weekly rhythm, connecting with people socially at least once a week, having at least one deep, long conversation. A spiritual practice, like praying, harder cognitive work, all right? And then taper. Before a big decision or a launch, protect your clarity. Have more recovery, fewer inputs, sharper focus. Arrive at your peak, not depleted. So the taper. So when I know that I have a big project coming up, I will take extra time, extra downtime, extra quiet time, extra me time, because I know that the push is coming. And another area is recovery. So after a peak, after you've come off of a big workload, let's say you've been working like crazy for the last 90 days, after that peak, there is a come down. And I think a lot of us beat ourselves up because we go, why don't I feel as good as I did last week? Last week, man, I was firing. Well, you overdid it. You crossed the line. You cross the line in your nervous system or not meeting one of these needs. You're depleting either your physical, your mental, emotional, your social, relational, spiritual, or somatic needs. And rest is training. So putting rest for me, when I build in my movement, when I build in and schedule in my rest into my schedule, in my pre-planned schedule, I don't feel as guilty about it. If I spin and spin and go and work as hard as I can, and then I hit a wall and have burnout and crash, I tend to feel guilty for taking that rest. I tend to beat myself up more. Maybe you're different than me, but I've noticed with myself, if I plan out rest, if I plan out movement, I am a lot better. I perform better, and I don't beat myself up as much about it. Because if I schedule in my movement time, just like I would for a client meeting or a dental appointment, right? We seem to be able to schedule appointments for other people and with other people. But when it comes to doing something for us, now we're giving ourselves a guilt trip for it. That's not right. That's not fair. So the athlete who skips recovery doesn't peak, they break. So coming back from an injury is so hard. The best way to come back from an injury is to not have an injury. Okay. So always thinking about, what exercise am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is it worth the risk? My number one rule here is don't be stupid. Live to fight another day. So name the guilt. In a world that is constantly speeding up, stepping away feels like we may be falling behind. That feeling is why people grind until their judgment degrades exactly when they need it most. My proposal is that we plan ahead and create a program where you will be able to perform at your very best and take the rest that you need to make the best decisions possible. Because important decisions don't always come up every single day. But in this world of AI, it seems as though they do, because things are moving faster. I used to make maybe one important decision every couple of weeks or so, very strategic decision. And now it seems that I'm forced to make it on a daily basis. So with this increased speed, how am I going to better take care of myself? How are you going to better take care of yourself so that you make better decisions to make a better life for yourself? Resolve the tension ahead of time. Build endurance for the rising load. So we know more load is coming, and we have to schedule that recovery from that load deliberately. The taper is part of the training. Yeah. So when an athlete is following a training plan and they have a week where they're tapering off, they're not beating themselves up for it. They're just following the plan. They understand it. This is just part of the plan for me to be at my best. I know the athlete knows that if they follow what their coaches are telling them to do with strength training, if they follow what their coaches are telling them to do for their skills training, they know that if they're following the advice from their coaches on their diet and their nutrition and their sleep, and when they're asked to reduce their load or when their load is reduced for them, they know that it's just part of the process. And that in order to perform at their very best on game day, this is just part of what they have to do to make sure that happens. So I'm asking you to reframe the way you think about your own rest, your own recovery, your own movement, your own food. Work in seasons beyond the daily peak. Humans just naturally move through reoccurring seasons of different kinds of work. Knowing which you're in lets you work with your own rhythm, not against it. Stop fighting against yourself. 3 seasons that can rotate. So you have a sprint, a consistency season, and a creative season. All right. And I was hoping to align this more with the natural seasons, but I would winter, spring, fall, and summer. And perhaps I will do that. I think that another season would just be a slow season, a season of 90 days where it's like a planning season. If I had to do this again, I'd probably add a planning season, a sprint, a consistency season, and then a creative season. But the idea is that we all have these natural rhythms, these natural seasons that we go through in life. And we will find ourselves in a season where we have a lot to do. We're sprinting, we're building something. And then once that implementation is done, we get to a place where we're just showing up every day, doing the boring work. But the boring work is very productive and it's important and it must be done. And those are the mindsets that are important during that season. And then during a creative season, where we're thinking ahead, exploring, planning, thinking outside the box, that requires a different mindset and perhaps a different program around your sleep and your social and the different inputs that you are giving yourself to optimize your creativity. So there may be different rhythms around each season for you specifically. Good decision makers aren't gifted with clarity. They train it, they protect it, and they time it. In a world moving at speed of the machines, the AI machines, your clear head is your edge. And an edge has to be maintained. And I think one way to take a lot of pressure off yourself, if you are putting pressure on yourself to have perfection, to be perfect, when you're doing something new, frame it as a practice. You're practicing. It's okay to practice. You can practice doing YouTube. You can practice giving presentations. You can practice going to the gym. You can practice weightlifting. You can practice a sport. You can practice bowling. You can practice walking around the park. You can practice martial arts. You can practice, on and on and on and on. Using the word practice has helped me so much. It takes so much of the pressure off. You're not trying to be the egomaniac number one, best of them all. You're practicing how to do things in a new way, or you're developing a practice of doing this every day. And with that, thank you for hanging out until the end. Like, subscribe, hype the video. It helps me out a lot. I belong to a community. I am leading the meeting on Friday. If you would like to show up, it's at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we share the projects that we are working on together. And if you're at all interested in AI, I think you would really enjoy this community. I will have a link down below to the Discord. It's 100% free. There's no fees or anything like that. So with that, thank you for hanging out with me. Like, subscribe, make a comment, share the video, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Face melting, my eyes dry, my hair static, skipping, reeling, stealing, congeal, real, fake, play, platitude, your attitude, never forever clever. I thought I'd be more clever. Never together, forever lies, cries abound. You thought I found no crowd, no witnesses. No one's looking, just the ego. Where you go nude though. The colors twisting and churning, so beautiful. I love the sunrise with your eyes. Mine are broken, I can't walk, I can't breathe all over. I'm broken. Never together, forever lies, cries abound. You thought I found no crowd, no witnesses. My face, my legs, I'm bloody. The woods, wooden, woody, moody, hoodie in the dark. No one saw you have the saw. Cut it down, run away, stay right there. This is rare. In the clear, in the clear. Don't panic, I'm manic. I like it though. Don't worry, no need to worry. Never together, forever lies, cries abound. You thought I found no crowd, no witnesses. It's fine, we're all fine, it's fine, it's a climb. We're reaching, crawling, slithering on our bellies. We can make it, don't take it, yes, take it. Let's go, turn and run as fast as you can.